Welcome to self-discoverywisdom.com, formerly known as Self-Discovery Media. On these podcasts, you're going to hear people who speak from the heart. They've taken the journey in life. Many things have happened to them, but they've changed it to happening for them. And in their strength, their courage, they've discovered their abilities and their wisdom, and they are now sharing it here with you. Do enjoy each show. We bring it to you with love and knowing that it's going to help you on your journey of life. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of The Nature of Addictions, right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Today, we're going to be talking about the truth of addiction, raw, honest conversations about addiction. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest is Dr. Samantha Harte. She says that through her medical practice, she's come to realize that whether you're an addict or not, we all suffer from some degree of soul sickness. We navigate love and loss through our lives with little or no guidance, often fumbling our way through self-sabotaging behaviors. Despite the initial resistance to the well-known 12 Steps Alcoholics Anonymous, Samantha eventually reimagined them so that they would work in her own life. In the process, she discovered that the spiritual concepts in each step have universal appreciation and can help people learn new ways of navigating adversity, not just addiction. And in her book, she shows you how you can change your life with the power of these steps. So yes, I 100% agree with you. Everybody focuses addiction on drugs or alcohol or sex or chocolate, but nobody actually looks at the soul desperately looking for some form of connection that very often shows up in some form of addiction. So welcome to the show, hun.
Thank you so much. I find it amazing every time somebody reads a blurb about my life and my story, my bio, because it's a moment where I can really feel proud of
Mm,
where I am today from where I came and talk about giving your soul something it needs. How about a
mm.
little recognition for how
Yes.
far we've come? So thank you for reading that. It's really special to hear that.
I mean, I'm always saying to people that sometimes we get to kind of a crossroads or, like I feel a pause in our life or something comes up, that we had to face in the past, a trigger. And it doesn't mean you're reliving it. What it sometimes is, please just stop, pause, look back and see how far you've come. And if
Mm.
we don't look back to see how far we come, we don't know how to measure just how awesome we really are and how awesome we've allowed ourselves to be. And that we're not that same person. And
Mm.
all that taught us was how to become if we were willing to take that journey through the process.
Mm. Yeah, I have so much to say about about all of that. Where do you want me to begin?
Wherever your heart tells you to go, my dear.
Okay. I think a really good place to start is somewhere in my early 20s. What I really wanted to do with my life at the time was be famous. Had no idea what for. I
Right?
loved singing and dancing,
Mm,
but I grew up in a house where my mother's word ruled, and
mm,
she really wanted me to get a degree because her life on all realms was so unstable that she felt that that was something no one could take from me.
right.
And so I was getting an undergraduate degree in communications because it just felt like some large umbrella I could
Yeah.
fit myself under.
Yes.
And living in the city, bartending, trying to pay my rent, teaching at a dance studio, and personal training. So
Mm,
just dabbling in
yes.
things that interested me. And I remember working in the gym as a personal trainer. I got this client, his name was Bobby, and he was real rough and tough. He was from Hell's Kitchen, which is, at least back in the day, was quite dangerous of a
Mm.
neighborhood to grow up in. His father was part of the Irish mob, and he told me tales like opening the front door at 13 years old to the man who shot and killed his father.
Oh my God.
He had really lived through some things, and
Mm,
he was 22 years sober from heroin addiction. I
mm,
had never met anybody in my life who was sober up until that point.
mm.
And I just loved him. He
Mm.
was such a truth teller. His spirit was so big and bright. And the only thing I had ever really been exposed to in my house was, if you had a bad day, you could pop a pill.
Yeah.
And I also had a sister who would sneak out at night and was very much experimenting with sex and drugs. So using drugs and alcohol as part of the fun of life was so incredibly normalized for
Right.
me.
Mm.
So even though I had this introduction to a sober man, I was drinking quite heavily as a bartender.
Yeah.
And then, not surprisingly, in my early 20s in New York City, I was introduced to cocaine. And
Hmm.
I was such a diehard perfectionist. There wasn't a single bone in my body that thought I would lose control of that drug
Mm.
ever. So I
Hmm.
tried it.
Yes.
And then I realized, wow, if I drink too much, I can just do some cocaine and I feel leveled out again.
Oh dear.
Lather, rinse, repeat. And so within a relatively short period, cocaine became my kryptonite.
Mm.
And all the while, I had been honing in on the degree I wanted to get to make my mother proud,
Right.
which was a doctorate in physical therapy. And I thought, well, maybe I can have my own clinic. Maybe I could go travel with a professional dance company. Maybe I could use the degree and merge it with this other thing with fame and entertainment that I was pining for. So I studied and I studied and I studied and I kept drinking and I kept drinking and I kept doing cocaine. And I got this acceptance letter that I was getting into a doctoral program. And boy, did I know how to celebrate. I called a woman who was 10 years older than me. She partied harder than I did. So she would easily co sign what was rapidly becoming an addiction to cocaine.
Mm.
We did cocaine all day long. And by the end of that day, I started to feel off. I was in my dumpy New York City apartment. She was wrapping Christmas gifts that we had bought all through the day. And I only remember grabbing the remote to my television and then waking up on the floor on my side. And my gaze slowly went from horizontal to vertical. She was on the phone with 911. She looked terrified and panic stricken, and she didn't know where I lived because we really weren't friends. We were just drug buddies.
Right.
Right. And I realized something awful must have happened. So I got her off the phone because the shame that was coming over
Yes.
me was so, so big.
Mm.
And I found out that I had overdosed,
Mm.
that I was convulsing, that she turned me on my side and pulled my tongue out of the back of my throat so I wouldn't choke.
Oh my God.
And I just happened to come to while she was on the phone.
Uh-huh.
And there's a lot that happened in that aftermath. But the thing I want to bring to the attention of the listener is that I called the one person I knew who was sober, which was Bobby,
Mm.
a few days later. And I said, I think I'm losing control of this thing. He said, come on, I'll take you to a meeting. Sat in the back, heard the language of the steps, othered myself to death. I am not
Mhm.
like you. I
Mhm.
don't look like you. I don't smell like you. I didn't drink and use like you. I don't belong here. I have a boyfriend and a degree and a job.
Mhm.
I have all these outside things. I was taught that self reliance is where it's at. I don't need you or this religious cult of a program that you're trying to press down my throat. Thank you very much. Goodbye. So I said, Bobby, not for me. Went on another year and a half just trying to anesthetize whatever shame and pain that would
Mhm.
take me many more years to unpack and uncover. And then the guy I was living with found this prescription bottle of medication that was not prescribed to me because my dad had been the family drug dealer for many, many, many years. So when I needed something, he refilled it and drove it into the city for me. So really all I had done was what a lot of addicts do, which is
Yes.
switch the cocktail,
Yes.
right,
Yes.
into something else.
Yeah.
And when the guy I was dating at the time caught me and held the bottle up, that look in his eyes was exactly the same look as my girlfriend who was
Mm.
calling 911. And I was filled once again with shame. Wow, this is totally out of control. It's not cocaine,
Yeah.
but it's just as out of control. And this guy is going to leave me if
Mm-hmm.
I don't do something. And I am nothing without his love for me. So again, I was brought into recovery, call Bobby again,
Mm-hmm.
not because I was ready
Mm-hmm.
to reckon with everything inside that I was trying to tame and quiet. I was going for something outside of me,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, I do not recommend.
No.
In my case, relapse happens not to be a part of my story, and I'll get to why I believe that is. But for so many of us, when for any kind of change, when we're not done,
Mm-hmm.
when we are still getting something
Yeah.
out of the way we're living, even if it's hurting us,
Mm-hmm.
or we're so unaware because it's so subconscious,
Mm-hmm.
if it's still working and the fear of making those changes to move the needle of our life in a new direction is too big, we'll stay where we are.
Yeah.
If
Yes.
we are on a soul level, so sick and tired and done
Mm-hmm.
of the way we're living, that staying in that place is scarier than whatever change we have to make, we will do the next thing we need to do
Mm-hmm.
to change our lives.
Yes.
So when I entered AA the second time, I sat in the back again
Mm-hmm.
with my arms crossed,
Mm-hmm.
othering myself to death. And for some reason, I kind of knew that if I didn't stay,
Mm-hmm.
all bets were off
Yeah.
for the trajectory of my life. So I stayed, but I hated the
Mm-hmm.
language of the steps. The only thing I believed was Bobby. So he took me all over Manhattan for a year, took me meeting to meeting to meeting, nudged me to raise my hand and share, which made me terribly anxious because I felt like I had nothing valuable to say to anybody because my inner critic in early recovery became so pronounced
Yes.
that I finally realized, oh my God, among other things, this is what I've been anesthetizing. No wonder I
Mm-hmm.
want to check out. I am a professional self lacerator. Perfectionism has a noose around my neck,
Mm-hmm.
and I need a reprieve. So I didn't want to raise my hand because that inner critic was like, girl, put your hand down.
Mm-hmm.
You are a piece of shit who has nothing valuable to say. So I barely shared. And he took me through the steps as best he could. And he just said, you don't need to believe in God. You don't even need to have faith. Just borrow mine until you have some of your own.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of that first year, I was well into my graduate program. So I was becoming sober as I was studying rigorously in
Uh-huh.
graduate school. No easy feat to do
No.
both of those at the same
No.
time. Bobby starts acting weird. I cannot put my finger on it. But we were friends in the gym before he was my sponsor. And I really didn't want the friendship to be compromised.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I have an opportunity to go to California for 8 weeks. It's part of my graduate program. I think I'm going to find a temporary sponsor. And you and I can just go back to being friends because I don't know what's happening, but I love you and I want to preserve the friendship. So I go to California and all of a sudden I feel this surge of possibility because it's a place where I could easily do physical therapy, but
Mm-hmm.
also there was a big pot of art and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taking dance classes again. People were picking me and noticing me and giving me these opportunities. And I thought, wow, maybe I'll be the choreographer who's a doctor of physical therapy. Like, check that out. That seems like it would be in high demand, right? And I wanted to tell Bobby everything that was happening. And I kept calling him and he wasn't picking up. And I was so angry. I thought, is this man really so egotistical that because I said, I don't want you to sponsor me anymore, he's not going to pick up his phone. You know, I was so naive.
Hmm.
And eventually his wife picked up and said, Bobby relapsed. That's why you haven't heard from him. Maybe you can see him when you get back to New York. So not only was I stunned, I was really just sucker punched because
Mm.
he was the only thing keeping me sober. He was literally the only thing I believed. He was the only model of any kind of recovery that I had ever had. So it was unimaginable to me that he relapsed. And I remember meeting up with him in New York and feeling really afraid because it felt like somebody crawled inside of his face and went behind his eyes and blew the light out. That spark,
Hmm.
that thing that made him quintessentially who he was gone. And in his place was some darker shadow version of himself who couldn't look me in the eye, who couldn't admit to a relapse, who was filled with excuses from a series of unfortunate things that happened after a shoulder surgery. And he was in a sling. And he was so desperate for company. I remember feeling really confused after that interaction. He asked me to come help clean up his apartment sometime in the next 2 weeks, and he'd pay me for it. And I remember pulling all this dirty laundry from the floor and putting it in the basket and walking with him down 8th Avenue to the laundromat. And I thought, I can't do this again. This is so uncomfortable. I'm so early in recovery. I don't understand what's happening, but I can't do this again. And a couple of weeks later, a sober friend who had a lot more time in recovery than me, who knew Bobby, said, Where are you right now? And I said, I'm in my apartment. Why? Well, I need you to stay there. I'm coming over. Never sounds like good news
No.
when it's that serious.
Hmm.
She comes over, she sits on my couch, puts her hand on my forearm, and says, Bobby's dead.
Yeah.
He killed himself. He jumped out of his 8-story window
Wow. What a way
and
to end.
died. And the reason I tell this story, not just because it's real and it
Hmm.
is my lived sober experience, but I tell it because in that moment, I knew for sure if I touched drugs and alcohol again,
Hmm.
I was dead. And I had gotten to a place where I knew I didn't want to die,
Yeah.
but I had no idea how to live.
Hmm.
The only thing I knew about living was to control everything outside of me
Hmm.
that feels safe and loved on the inside. And I spent the next 4 years not doing the steps because I hated them.
Hmm.
Because what I learned about God was that there is no such thing. And to believe in God makes you a fool. So the steps, not only did they sound religious and they feel religious, and the language in the books sounds very religious,
Hmm.
they're also pretty patriarchal just based on the time they were written.
Yes.
And I'm a woman.
Hmm.
They didn't land in my nervous system in a way
Hmm.
that was safe at all.
Right.
So I remained physically abstinent for years. And then my marriage to that guy who I was dating when I was a hardcore addict who found the bottle of pills because he became my fiance, then he became my husband. Way before we were ready to do any of those things,
Right.
he started pulling away, emotionally withdrawing, rejecting. And I really tried to get my claws in this man. I was sure if I said and did just the right thing,
Hmm.
he would forgive me for all the things I did to him in my active addiction. that we would heal once and for all if you just go to therapy, if you just go to the other 12-step program for the people who love the addict and who are angry. We'll be okay. Don't you tell me what to do. This is your fault. I went insane,
Mm-hmm.
unsuccessfully trying to change this man's mind. And what that looked like was months and months and months of couch surfing on different people's couches. Because I was sure when the next stint of sleeping at my friend's place was up, my husband would be ready
Yes.
to love me again and I would be okay. And he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was such insanity the way I was living. And finally, a sober friend said, if you're not ready to leave your marriage, you have to get a place that is yours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had gone away to college for 2 years, but I had a roommate when I did that. I had moved into Manhattan in my early 20s, lived alone for a split second, but then had roommates. And then
Mm-hmm.
quickly after, that man who was now my husband lived with me. So I was being asked to not know
Yeah.
the future of my marriage, to sign a lease and live alone as a 30-year-old woman for the first time in my life. It was terrifying to
Mm-hmm.
me. And yet I knew I really had no other option unless I wanted to relapse and die like Bobby.
Yeah.
So I signed a lease. And it was at this time in my life, which was a really dark, depressed, scary time, that the right woman walked into my life because
Mm-hmm.
I had had a lot of sponsors in between Bobby and this moment who weren't right for me, who were God thumpers when I was full well anti God, and they
Right.
couldn't meet me where I was at. But
Mm-hmm.
this woman said, what if we do the steps on your marriage?
Mm.
Because you're not about to run out the door and buy an 8 ball of cocaine. Maybe eventually, if we don't treat this
Yeah.
spiritual malady, you
Yes.
will. But what if we do this about the matter at hand? Sounded like a good idea. So we did. And all of a sudden, the steps had brand new meaning.
Mm.
And they were something that could move my life forward down an actual healing path. So, step one in recovery is I am powerless over whatever it is, alcohol, drugs, food, sex, whatever you're in a 12-step program for. And my life has become unmanageable. The point of that step is to just admit that you've
Yeah.
lost control,
Yeah.
right? Okay. I knew I lost control of drugs and alcohol a long time ago. Was I ready to admit that I was powerless over my husband,
Mm.
the
Mm-hmm.
way he felt about me, whether he was ever going to forgive me, the future of our marriage, all of my hopes and dreams that I was sure were going to happen,
Uh-huh.
but they might not. Am I ready to admit my powerlessness over those things? And that when I try to exert power over them, my life becomes completely unmanageable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm couch surfing. I'm anxious. I'm obsessive. I'm filled with rage. I have no access to real peace
Mm-hmm.
and real power. And I have zero sense of self worth. Right. And all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden, whoa, that makes a lot of sense to me. And we kept going, step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we get to the amends process, which is step 9. And in recovery, traditionally, this is a process of making amends to the people you have wronged,
Right.
right? And let me be very frank, when you are, especially in the end stages of active addiction, you have hurt a lot of people.
Yes.
There is a time and place for making amends and not just saying you're sorry, but amending the
Yes.
behavior. Okay.
Mm.
However, I have not met a single addict who is not walking around with a corrosive amount of shame inside of
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
Why we are not taught, because your resentment list, which
Uh-huh.
is step 4, becomes your amends list. We need to be at the top of
Yes.
our resentment list and then at the front and center of our amends list.
Mm-hmm.
And this woman, for the first time in my whole life, said, have you ever made an amends to yourself?
Mm.
Act of revolution.
Yeah.
I am a hardwired perfectionist. I have been running on self ridicule to keep me moving ahead.
Mm-hmm.
It had never been taught to me. It had never occurred to me naturally that I might just be a good person who made some bad choices.
Mm-hmm.
And that this life, this marriage I was swimming in, drowning in, might not be something I deserve.
Yeah.
Because I was running around with the idea that the punishment
Mm-hmm.
fit the crime. I
Mm-hmm.
deserve exactly what I'm getting, which is breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
This is when my life began.
Mm-hmm.
And I happened to be one of the lucky ones that was taught by such horrific, tragic circumstances that if I touched substance, I was dead. And I made it that far till I finally could start to get well. But so many addicts
Mm-hmm.
die before they get there.
Yes.
And so many people live half alive
Mm-hmm.
for their entire life. They numb out.
Yeah.
They use addiction to all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the concept of soul sickness comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Addiction to denial,
Mm-hmm.
addiction to thinness,
Mm-hmm.
the beauty standard, addiction to productivity. If I'm busy enough,
Yeah.
I don't have to be with myself. I
Exactly.
don't have to honor the fact that I'm in a shitty job that I
Mm-hmm.
hate because I need the money, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm stuck in a marriage that's loveless. We are coasting at a 5 out of 10.
Uh-huh.
And maybe it's not as dire as my scenario, where one more 8 ball of cocaine could end my life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's dire on a soul level where you're going to get to the end of yours and go, what have I done?
Yeah. Yes.
How have I lived?
You haven't.
And so for 10 years, because I'm now 15 years sober, I have used these steps again and again and again in a modern,
Mm-hmm.
compassionate, trauma informed way, not just on myself,
Mm-hmm.
because boy, have I been through it in the
Yes.
last decade, but on my clients
Mm-hmm.
and with my friends who are not people who identify
Mm-hmm.
as traditional addicts.
Yes.
And I'm seeing it help people again and again and again. And I'm thinking, why haven't these steps been updated?
Right.
Why isn't
Yes.
everyone able to access them?
Yes.
And so much of it is that we haven't refreshed the language with what we now know
Yeah.
about addiction, childhood trauma, psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a firm believer, just like with the body, I'm a doctor of physical therapy, the amount of bogus fitness myths that still exist in 2024
Mm-hmm.
is astounding to me. And I'm the girl that wants to bust through them and
Mm-hmm.
tell people the truth
Yeah.
so they can gain agency over their body and prevent injury and be 95 years old dancing around like a fool at their
Mm-hmm.
grandkids' wedding.
Yeah.
Same is true for the spirit side of wellness. I feel like when we know better, we should do better.
Exactly.
And my book is this beautiful merger of everything I have learned as a clinician over the past decade about the science of real change and everything I have lived through in my sober experience. And it's a template, a brand new take on the 12 steps so that anybody, whether they're an addict or not, can use them as a pathway through their pain. no matter what they're going through.
So the thing about the 12 steps is the principle of what they meant had good footing, but the language, it only really addressed a certain demographic, basically white religious men, which is really where it kind of founded. There wasn't the language for women because, quite honestly, they didn't know that women actually operated differently. And the issues of women are different. One of the
Mm,
things that people don't realize is that unless we're connected to soul, which connects to our heart and our spirit and our meaningful purpose, we're living an exterior life, not an interior life. And
mm,
why we constantly feel in lack and are searching outside, validation. Do you approve? Do you love me? Am I thin enough? Am I this enough? Am I that enough? And all the things that we do to ourselves in order to get that approval
mm,
is coming through soul lag of not being connected to heart, soul, and spirit. Because when we connect to that, we become whole. The essence of us is our light. And that is what shines bright. And it does not need anybody else's approval, anybody else's validation. It is your own. But we're taught as a society that we need to be like this one, like that one. We can only be loved if we're this, or we
mm,
can only be accepted in life if we've done that, or we're rich enough, thin enough, popular enough, this enough, that enough. Now, we can take that enough and throw it down the garbage. And the only enough that applies is I am enough,
mm,
right? And nobody else has the right to tell me that I'm not, as long as I'm coming from that place of soul, heart, spirit connection. But people are not taught that. Were you taught that growing up? We're taught religion, but we're not
mm.
taught soul connection. And that is why we have so much more addiction out there today, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's self-abuse, self-depredation. You know,
Yep.
I was a people pleaser, bending to
Yes,
a
let's talk
pretzel.
about that.
Oh my God, I was a pretzel, bending backwards, breaking bones to please people. And then what you found out is that it didn't matter how much you bent, you didn't please them anyway. It didn't
That's
matter what
right.
you did, they were never pleased. And you
Mm,
just went around, well, what if I did this? Would they be pleased now? What if I did that? And you completely lose yourself. Who am I? I have no idea.
mm,
No idea whatsoever because I've been so busy chameleoning what everybody else wanted from me that I'd lost my own identity altogether, lost my connection to heart, soul, and spirit, which was the very core of me, which
mm,
was the person of my truth and my purpose. And I suppressed that to be this humanoid looking for approval from everyone else because I wasn't like everyone else. I was
mm,
different. And I was taught that different was bad. So
mm,
trying to be what everybody else expected me to be, I went out of my way to do it and ended up being the one to suffer. So your addiction, pleasing your mother. Your mother was a perfectionist, right? Oh, yes, I want you to do this for your security. But no, it was her expectation of you. That
mm,
expectation of that was put forward to you of it's got to be perfect. It's got to be perfect. You've got to give it your all. It's got to be perfect. You don't count unless it's perfect. And so you put all that pressure on yourself,
mhm,
right? And then I'd love to be a star. I'd love to be famous. Why? Because you really want people to see you for who you are and accept you for who you are, but you weren't who you were because you were living up to somebody else's expectation. And you only now know who you are because you were willing to face the demons and to
mm,
take the journey to look in and go, I don't need that husband to validate me. I don't need my mother to approve. I don't need someone else to tell me I'm doing it wrong. I know in my own heart, the core of my being,
mm,
what is good for me, and I will honor myself. But you took the journey to get there and rearranging those 12 steps to speak the language of self love, not
mm,
self persecution, of soul, heart, and spirit awakening, that we are so much more than the body we're in, so much more than the mind that is being programmed. We
mhm.
are beautiful soul spiritual beings having a human existence. And part of the problem of humanity today is that lack of connection.
Yep. And I will say that two things. so much of what I've unpacked all these years and in writing my book is how far back this goes, which is what you're
Yeah.
talking about, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about decades
Yes.
of cultural conditioning.
Absolutely.
We are talking about decades of parental input
Oh,
that is only going to be as good as the work they've done on themselves.
oh boy. We
Okay.
are a mirror of their own lack. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And so, again, when I'm sitting in the back of an AA room, that's what I'm bringing in.
Yeah.
Someone's got to meet me there
Yes.
because you might miss me and I
Yeah.
might die.
Yeah.
This is serious, deeply
Yes.
rooted stuff that is so cemented in my circuitry. No
Hmm.
wonder I went running off trying to hold on to these beliefs
Hmm.
for so long and got lucky that I didn't die.
Yeah.
And then I will say, in that healing process, when I was at my true soul level rock bottom in that apartment with that woman doing
Hmm.
this work, it was not until I made that amends to myself
Hmm.
that I could finally hear the whisper of my intuition.
Yeah.
She had been totally silenced because my earliest memory as a young girl was my intuition saying, Mommy gets really scary when she
Mm.
takes those pills.
Mm.
I'm going to ask her about it. My sweet, sweet intuition.
Hmm.
And I said, Why do you have to take those pills every night? And she looked at me and said, Do you like the things you have? Yeah. If you like the things you have, I need to work. I need to make money to get you those things. And in order for me to work and make money, I have to sleep. In order for me to sleep, I have to take these pills. Conversation over.
Yes.
Never to be had again.
Hmm.
Not how does it feel when you see mommy take those pills?
Hmm.
Where maybe there could have been a conversation about my anxiety because she
Yeah.
became something scary and unfamiliar
Yeah.
when she was under that influence. She would eat more stuff
Mm.
off the kitchen counter in a 30-minute period high before the drugs put her fast
Yeah.
asleep than she had eaten all day long. I didn't understand
Yes.
why she became a shell of herself. So she told me, don't ask me that again. The
Uh,
first thing I learned was not to
to
trust my
ask.
intuition,
Right.
right?
Exactly. But
Okay,
also a sense of guilt. Like mom
absolutely.
is taking these pills and going through all of this because she's providing for me. So subconsciously, there's a guilt there too.
Exactly. Oh my God, this is partly my responsibility.
Yeah.
I better not ask her again
Yes. Yes.
if I want those things I have.
Yeah.
And this is not to say any of that to blame her. She
No,
clearly did the best she could with the tools she had, which were few and far between.
exactly.
But I say that because until I could hear the sweet sound of my intuitive voice, I was just being run by
Mm.
pre-programmed beliefs.
Yeah.
And so when I finally heard her again, it was a little scary because it was coming from down here in my gut.
Yeah.
And it was always so calm and expansive. It was nothing like the voices in my head, the
Yeah.
critic,
Yeah.
the rumination and obsessive voice, right? It was so clear and concise and compassionate. And so slowly, I would start to pay attention to her and
Mm.
I would listen to what she had to say. And I would take an action in that direction that she was nudging me in.
Hmm.
And something awesome would happen. And I started to have small wins that accumulated into kind of a pile of evidence that, man, when I honor my intuition, my spirit, soul,
Hmm.
the truest part of who I am,
Hmm.
really great things happen.
Yes, this core of your
And
being.
and when they don't,
Mm.
she's standing beside me, loving me
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
that eventually became the God of my own understanding.
Right.
Now, today, I can hear the language of those steps. I can say
Mm-hmm.
all the prayers at the end of a meeting that
Mm-hmm.
are baked in religious context. And I know what they mean for me because I've
Exactly.
undone all the attachments I had to my conditioning. And in that dark, desperate place in that apartment, I was a blank canvas
Mm-hmm.
and I got to rewire
Yeah.
my circuitry. So I could imagine what God meant to me now, if
Mm-hmm.
anything at all.
Yeah.
So I can say God, I can talk about it, I can pray, I can do all these things that as an atheist were unimaginable to
Yes.
me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you sound like someone who is so deeply connected to your soul and your essence. How do people get there? Right? This is my story. I have
Yeah.
a really dramatic story of almost dying, of seeing the people around me die again and
Yes.
again. But we didn't even talk about the catalyzing moment that made me start writing my book.
Mm-hmm.
But how does someone who doesn't know through such dark experiences how to get reacquainted when they're just operating in their conditioning? Because don't we all
Yeah.
need a dark night of the soul
Mm-hmm.
to wake up? And then that's not enough. We can't just wake up, we have to have a template in place
At least know where the first step is, for Christ's sake.
to
Yeah.
practice
Yeah.
something new,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? To have a real chance at creating real new neural
Yeah.
pathways that
Exactly.
can move the needle of our lives in a
Yes.
new direction, which is why I have such a call to action for people, because this is not self-care.
No.
Maybe it is, but I'm talking about if we're suffering from soul sickness,
Mm-hmm.
this is soul care. This is an
Self-love.
internal template,
Yes.
an internal
Yes.
template that you can draw on anytime, anywhere, that you don't have to buy, that you don't have to leave your house for. That when you shoot up in the middle of the night with
It's there for
anxiety,
you. It's there for
it's
you.
there for you,
Yes. Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So,
But you got to be willing to go through the process. I mean, I say there's a nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and a cosmic two by four. So your first cosmic two by four, even though you have the nudge, nudge, wink, wink, was the overdose, right? The second one was your guy committing suicide and realizing if he for so long was clear, for so long, and then he relapsed and out came the window not long after that, that was the red flag of like, how long would it take me if I ignore this? This is time to do something about it. But what came after that? A gift of a woman saying, forget about your addiction. What about your marriage? Let's apply it to your marriage. And
mm,
then you looking at your marriage through the 12 steps in a totally different view, where it kind of made sense to you, where you could really objectively look at it. That's what we need in our life. As you said, someone that greets the person at the back of the room and
mm,
saying, you don't have to be religious. That's just the wording, right? Well, all we want you to do is just be here. We're here for you. We'll speak your language. Instead of demanding everybody else speak the same language, we've got to start having different language that speaks to everybody. It has to be more universal language. At the same time, when we have broken through and it's enough is enough, and we
mm,
know it. We know when we get to that point, enough is enough. I can't be in this darkness anymore. I've got to come out into the light. And the thing is, when you come out into the light, it's blinding. The light is so blinding. You can't see anything because it's too bright. And then you feel that the dark shadows are chasing you and they go to pull you back in until you get to that point where you adjust to the light and realize the shadows are contouring the light. They're giving meaning and shape to the light. And you're willing then to see what really is important and feel what really is important. And you start feeding the positive words, the positive actions, the gratitude actions, one step at a time. Don't try and do things fast. I got up today. I'm grateful. I have a positive attitude today. I'm grateful. I saw something beautiful today. I'm grateful. And the more and more you do that, the more and more your body and your psyche and everything else, I want to see more beauty. I want to see more things to be grateful for. I want to do things that I can be more grateful for. And you start feeding that desire. And you start doing things and seeing things that you know are more organically good for you, that make you feel good, where you can start feeling the very core of you come alive. It's like, yes, we want your heart to be ignited, but the core of you right here, that core, that compass, that soul truth. When it says, no, don't do it, don't argue. Don't argue. Just don't do it. When it says it's okay, explore, then you know you can explore. But it is our truth compass. God, universe, spirit, source, energy, whatever you wish to call it. It's our divine compass that is there to guide our human selves on this journey of life to our meaningful purpose.
Mm.
But it is the decision to come out of the dark into the light and say, I am willing and ready to accept where I need to go. And if you're not willing to take the journey, you want to make it a quick fix. There's no downloadable app. There's no quick pill. There's no like, hurry up, I want to get there. No, it's a step by step. And the stronger the step, the wider the step will go. Even the leaps will come. Because if you're confident enough to do it, that you are going with yourself and not against yourself.
Mm.
But it is a journey. And we need the help. We need people like you who can redo the language, that can talk about the experience. I've interviewed so many people on addiction, and it was that moment of somebody they met when they
Mm.
just had enough. Something happened, that cosmic 2x4, and they met the right person at the right time that said the right thing. And when they're in that right state of mind, for it to shift,
Mm.
to decide, I can't go down this road anymore. I've got to look for a different path. And when you're willing to look for that different path, when we're willing to say, I am more than this, nobody's hurting me, I'm hurting myself. I have to stop doing this. How do I learn to love me? How do I look to my inner child and love that child, hug that child, and tell that child it's safe, it's
Mm.
okay? You've got to be willing to do the work. And that means narrowing your path. It means saying goodbye to some people you know. It means changing careers or even not talking to family members, not until you're completely healed and you can manage it, or maybe never at all. But you've got to be willing to narrow your path, because this is all about you right now, not about anyone else. You will lose people along the way, but there were people that were not meant to be in your life anyway.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So true. And in the spirit of talking about being in our purpose,
Mm-hmm.
for a decade, I out here in California had a private practice. And for that time it was amazing, because when I got out of school and I really studied the healthcare landscape, I was heartbroken over the reality of so many things. The
Mm-hmm.
reality of the debt that I had compared to the income I was
Yes.
going to make, over why I really went to school, which was to help change people's lives,
Mm-hmm.
and what it really looked like, which was everyone chasing down people's symptoms and never
Mm-hmm.
actually treating the source.
Yeah.
And I studied and paid close attention to the needs that weren't being met. And so I started a practice that was whole body, whole person, that bridged the gap between when insurance said, something outside of us
Mm-hmm.
said, you're good enough, and the person's inner knowing that they wanted to be 100%. And I thought, that's the role I'm going to play.
Mm-hmm.
So I became really good at rewiring faulty movement patterns,
Mm-hmm.
empowering people with the biomechanics of their body in a functional way, so that they were actually preparing their bodies to meet the demands of the task
Mm-hmm.
of their lives, whatever
Yeah.
that was. Maybe
Yeah.
it was just that they wanted to get up and down from the floor to play with their grandkids without
Yes.
knee pain, right? I
Yeah.
had a lot of
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And all the while, of course, I'm going through lots of lived sober experience,
Mm-hmm.
much of which, by the way, is in the book. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to jump to the moment when I knew that part of my career was going to change forever,
Mm-hmm.
which is that 2 years ago, I got a call that my sister died of a drug overdose. And this is a moment that I had feared for
Mm-hmm.
decades
Mm-hmm.
because she was actively in her addiction, tried a couple times to get sober, but I had been waiting and dreading
Mm-hmm.
that phone call. A lot of the time, our worst case scenarios don't ever come to
Yeah.
pass,
Yeah.
right? And here it was. And I knew obviously that I would never be the same again in that moment. I also knew in that moment that I was going to write a book. I had no idea what the book was going to be about.
Mm-hmm.
I also knew that, yes, I was a doctor of physical therapy and I was great at it, but I was so much more than that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, whatever I was going to do from that moment forward, it was going to have to allow all of me
Mm-hmm.
to show up.
Yeah.
The sober woman who didn't know how to live, but wasn't ready to die, who had learned to love herself after hating herself.
Mm-hmm.
Every single piece of my story, coupled with the clinician I had become, had to show up to
Mm-hmm.
these new spaces. And so I let the physical therapy stuff take a back seat. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And as I became clearer that what I was trying to do was help as many people as possible, I thought, well, what helped you the
Mm-hmm.
most?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, when you did the steps in that fresh, practical way.
Yeah.
So, what if your book was broken into 12 chapters that
Ah.
corresponded with the 12 steps? And what if
Mm-hmm.
you took the language as it is laid out, put it in, and then broke it down and broke it apart and broke through to the reader
Yes.
by sharing your personal experience with what you learned about power as a young
Yeah.
girl
Yeah.
and all the ways you've had to reconstruct your idea of what it means to have access to real power and real
Mm.
peace. And then, because your story is quite dramatic, make a more real life, day to day scenario
Yeah.
so that the person who's reading, who loves the story but can't relate,
Yeah.
can go, oh, I have been stuck in traffic
Yeah.
when I
Uh-huh.
was really trying to be early and I went into a fit of rage. This might apply to me.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps I could use step
Mm-hmm.
one in the middle of a traffic jam to access more peace and power
Right.
in my life, right? And all of a sudden, I'm realizing as my book is coming together and I'm starting to get clearer,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is the thing
Yes.
you're going to be known for.
Yeah.
This is the thing you were supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Come hell and high water
Mm-hmm.
to get here. That little girl who just wanted to be seen and loved,
Mm-hmm.
I am seen by me. I am
Yes.
loved by me.
Yes.
I want to give that to other people in the
Mm-hmm.
way that it was given to me. I couldn't save my sister's life. Boy, did I try.
Yeah.
Some people along this journey of becoming an author and a best selling one, by the way, I just found out yesterday, which is
Bravo. Bravo.
insane, want to know what they can do and
Yes.
say to the person who is sick and suffering. To which I respond, I wish I could tell you the exact thing
Mm-hmm.
to say and do. I couldn't save my sister's life, but I know what saved mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I will share that with you. And I also know that some of the proudest moments that I have when I think about my sister and when I finally stopped pretending that I could save her, that I was God to her,
Mm-hmm.
that if only I shoved it down her throat enough, she would finally hear it.
Yeah.
some of my best moments before she died were letting her know how much I loved her
Mhm.
and that there is nothing she could say or do that it would ever stop me from loving her. So when somebody's asking me, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
You grieve,
Yeah.
you tell them you love them,
Mhm.
and you're proud of them because
Yeah.
they definitely don't love themselves
No.
and they are definitely not proud of themselves.
Yeah.
And then you keep doing your own healing
Yes.
because that is the thing that we can control and
Yes.
change.
And you never know when it's going to be that ignition for someone else. Maybe somebody who's been in it for a long time and tired, I don't want to be down this road anymore. Or maybe somebody that doesn't realize they have an addiction. As I said, it doesn't have to be alcohol or drugs. Maybe
Mm,
it is you're quick to anger. Maybe it is food. Maybe it is sex. Maybe it is the way you flip people off. There's always something that we do and that we do repetitively, and very often it's out of defense,
mm,
right? It's out of the disconnection. And when we kind of realize, I have a habit of doing that. Well, if
mm,
it's a habit, maybe there's something addictive about that habit that you keep doing it for. And the more you become aware of the small things and you change those small things, then those larger things
mm,
don't grow. But when we don't pay attention to those small things, that anger can turn to more rage, can turn to violence, violence to self, violence to someone else, and it's all out of control. So for somebody, as you said, driving down the road and getting road rage, what's the point? You're not going to make anybody go fast, right? A
mm.
change, or, I mean, there's nothing worse than somebody going from the third lane, cutting across you to turn off. And I nearly had an accident doing that the other day. See, I call, oh, you idiot, you stupid idiot, and then let it
Mhm.
go, right? Yes, they're an idiot. They nearly caused an accident. To get into a rage about it, does that person care? No. What's it doing to you?
Exactly.
How is it hurting you? And this is the thing is, how does it make me feel to get into a rage? Uncomfortable.
Mm,
It hurts. So why do it? This is something you can do differently. And when we know we can consciously do something differently, we feed that. But
mm.
very often we're just simply unaware. Oh, an addict's a drug addict, pill addict, boozer, that's what the addict. No, you've got some top business people and politicians that are addicts, not for alcohol, not for booze, but for power.
That's
Why?
right.
Because there's a little child inside of them that never met that approval, and they're trying to get it this way.
Exactly. And I, it's interesting to be where I am right now and wanting to speak on stages and
Mm,
wanting to spread this message to as many people as
yes.
possible. And the thing that I love so much about it is, of course, not just that it's true to my lived experience, but that it's an actual step-by-step process because we're
Yeah.
talking in this conversation about so many things,
Yes.
so many tools that from where you and I sit, we've really accumulated over
Hmm.
the trajectory of our lives, right? But when you are just at the precipice of change in that beautiful space where you're willing, but you have no
Where
idea
to go or what to do.
where to
Right. Yes.
start,
Yes.
right? The fact that these are steps that go in order
Yeah.
for a reason
Yeah.
that you get to use any one of at any time for any situation. And that the big joke in the rooms of recovery is God, it took me a long time to say I was a grateful addict, by the way. I was so pissed when I got there, but now I get it, right?
Yes.
Because it almost feels like the joke is on everyone else because we got a blueprint
Mm,
for how to do this thing called life
yes.
in 12 steps.
Yeah.
You don't have to guess where to start. You
Right.
literally start at step one.
Apply. That's what you started. Apply, right? Step one, apply it. Don't just read it and ignore it and it's very good. Apply it to your life. And if step one takes you a little while before you can move to step two, stop rushing through the steps. You don't go to the next step until you've really fully acknowledged the first step. Right? That's the apply. How many people they're looking? Yes, tell me the answer. Tell me the answer. Tell me the answer. I'll do it. What's next? What's next? No. Take a breath. Acknowledge where you're at. You've just acknowledged you need help. Now here's the step one. Now apply. Doesn't help if you don't apply.
That's right. And also again, being met with compassion
Yeah. Not
is
blame, not shame.
is
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky
Yes.
because, addicts helping addicts is an amazing thing, but we only have the tools that we have, right?
Mm.
And so, I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of times in recovery in the beginning when I was fighting tooth and nail, how I was being told I was self-will run riot and I was totally in my ego. And it's not that simple. I was in conditioned beliefs.
Yes.
Okay. I
Yes.
was
Addicts
in,
don't come out of nowhere. They come out of a pattern, a
I was in,
programming.
yes,
Yeah.
I was in survival
Yeah.
mode.
Yeah.
So you're now telling me all this stuff that my body is having a visceral reaction to that's going, not safe, not safe, not
Yeah.
safe. And I'm fighting you on it because I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
But you're telling me I'm an egomaniac. We're missing
Yeah.
the larger suffering.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much, right? To say, hey, you've been running on a notion that this is going to get fixed quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I get that, right? To the person you said who wants to get to step 2 and 3 and 4.
Yes.
Hey, hang on. Hey, you might have had some really great success quickly getting into the solution in other parts of your life. In this case, with matters of the heart,
Mm.
it's a slow and steady race. And I know that feels scary
Yeah.
and new to you, but I promise it's worth it.
You got to get to the core, to the root of the problem. And that was always a scary thing for me. I didn't want to open my Pandora box
Mm.
because I was scared that if I did, it would consume me. But when I did open it and I started unpacking it, I realized I actually had power of cleaning it out,
Mm.
that it didn't consume me because I was in the right mindset to meet it. I was in the right heart and soul set. I was there to heal myself, not condemn myself.
Mm.
Right. And that's when we have that free will to say, I need help, and we're willing to ask someone for that help, is to understand how long did it take you to get there? A lifetime. Even if
Yep.
you started addict in your 20s, it took you a lifetime to get there because it's programming along the way that told you this would be your answer instead of
Mm-hmm.
something else. So it's not going to take you another lifetime to unprogram, but it's still, you've got to acknowledge what the programs are in order to delete them.
That's
You have to
right.
face them and say, you are no longer wanted or validated. Delete.
Yep. Mm.
It takes time, takes persistence, it takes love, but the more and more you immerse into it, the more and more you let your core open up and guide you, and the heart start feeling for you, and the soul start, being that compass, the easier it gets. And every step gets easier and easier along the way, right? But it still isn't I would say the biggest leap you'll take in your life is the first step.
Mm. I agree with that. Yeah.
But no cha-cha-cha, no back steps.
And there's such a uniqueness to each person,
Yeah.
to their lived experience, their story about what it's going to take
Hmm.
for them to get there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
some of us never do.
right. And we don't have control over other people. I believe that inspiration begets invitation. And I know today through your story and the work that you're doing, you're inspiring somebody out there who's struggling, whether it's
Mm,
small addiction or whether they just wish to call it a habit, that they're
mm,
realizing it's not serving them. And they're going to want to get your book and start looking at how they can take that journey forward and best
mm,
honor themselves. But there will be other people that you can throw the book at them, you could read the book at them, they're not going to absorb it because they have not yet registered there is a problem.
yep.
And you cannot save people from drowning if they're perpetually going under the water.
Mm,
You can inspire them and look at me, look where I've been. Please don't say, I've done it, so you can do it, because that is not what somebody wants to hear, right? It is like, I've done it, my life is so much better for it.
mm,
That is, oh, if your life is better from it, from doing it, then maybe I'm interested in it, right? It's always be careful of the wording that you use around people.
mhm. Yep.
So, rewritten the 12 steps to ignite heart, to ignite soul, to speak to people no matter what faith or what anything they are, practical steps that
Mm,
they can immerse into. It doesn't matter what cosmic language or human language they're speaking, it's something they can relate to, whether it's relating to one or all of it. And the whole thing is whether you have issues. I mean, let's face it today, we have so many people with anger issues that it is becoming its own little pandemic,
mm,
right? Where does the anger come from? It comes from fear, it comes from anxiety. Why are you constantly anxious? Why do you constantly go to the anxious space? You're unknowingly an addict to anxiousness, and you don't
mm.
even know where it stems from.
Yep.
You got to be willing to turn back those pages and look at that old programming. Where did it stem from? Because where it stems from, you can release and let go. But you got to be willing to do the work. And your step by step by step is going to help them along the way.
I sure hope so. That's the goal. And I will say, just the initial messages I've been getting from coming onto people's podcasts who heard
Mm-hmm.
me share about this or who got an earlier copy of the book. Now the book is officially out as
Mm-hmm.
of Monday, mean everything to me,
Yeah. Yes.
you know? And it's it's my passion, it's my purpose. I'm going to do this work until the day I die. I'm going to get on stages and speak
Yep.
to large groups of people that don't identify with traditional addiction at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And just take this wherever I can and cast the widest net possible on who I can help. And it feels so good. That little girl inside of me that wanted to be a superstar, to really unpack that and go, yeah, man, once upon a time, it was from the outside in that you
Yeah.
wanted that. And now, regardless of what happens,
Mhm.
everything you're doing is from the inside out.
I don't believe that any of us are given more than what we're capable of. And I think that all of our journeys, but we can't always say what happens to us. It's not our choice to what happens to us. It is our choice what we do with it, right?
Yep.
And whether it's a short term or long term, the whatever has happened to us, how we choose to look at it, how we choose to go through it, how we choose to become, is that journey. But it's a surrender and allow. And at you've definitely reached that stage now where it's like, this was my purpose all along.
Hmm.
I had to go through it. I cannot speak to the pain and the suffering and the struggle of it had I not gone through it.
Yep.
Otherwise, I'd just be a clinical doctor talking about old cases. Going through it, people can relate, empathize. They know that you understand the challenges and the difficulties. You've talked about all of the battles. And some people may have more battles to go through before they're ready to go through there, but everything has a reason. And I've interviewed people where some things have happened to them should never happen to a human being,
Mm,
never happen to a human being. Who they've chosen to be today and the light that they are for others on that journey was the whole reason for them being. And this is where you're at right now.
Mm.
You've become that light that illuminates other people's path on their struggle
Hmm.
and shows them you're not alone. You do count, and I'm here for you.
That's right. What a beautiful way to end.
Yeah, except how do people get the book? How do they reach you? Are you serving people one on one? What's going on, girl?
Yes. So, yes to all of that. So, first of all, my book is now available on Amazon. Breaking the Circuit: How to Rewire Your Mind for Hope, Resilience, and Joy in the Face of Trauma. It's doing really well, which is so exciting. So, you can order the book and it'll show up a day or two later, thanks to the world we live in. And then
And
I have
mhm,
a lot of other things available. So, absolutely, I think the one on one coaching is the most impactful and the most meaningful to me. So, anybody who's looking for any type of service, because I am a physical therapist,
mhm,
so of course, I can treat the body. My
yes,
perfect client is somebody who wants the mind, body, soul. So, we can get all the way into all of the things
yeah, the
and not
whole of
just
you.
have,
Hmm.
a template for how to protect and care for your body, your vessel forever, but how to protect and care for your spirit
Yes,
forever.
yes.
So, yes to the one on one coaching, absolutely. And all of my social media platforms and my website are the same. It's
Hmm.
dr.samanthaharte.com, HARTE. So, you can get in touch with me in any of those ways. I also am about to launch a community platform
Hmm.
for $10 a month
Hmm.
that will allow all of us
Hmm.
to have access to hundreds of pre recorded workouts, guided meditations, stretching programs, basically physical therapy at your fingertips
Yeah,
that you would otherwise have to pay a fortune
yeah,
for, and live Q&A with me, coaching, community, forums, and feedback, experts that come into the
mm,
group and share. So we can really talk about in an expert and authentic way what it is to heal in mind and body and spirit.
mhm.
So that is coming really soon. You'll have to stay in touch with me on social media. I also just recently shared a link to put your info in so you can get a newsletter about when that part of what I'm doing is fully launched.
Right. And you got a podcast.
I sure do. I have a podcast called The Truth About Addiction, and I do much of what you're doing.
Hmm.
I broaden the lens on addiction
Yeah.
and we talk about all of it. And I've
Hmm.
had some incredible guests. I'm stepping up the frequency that I release my episodes. Now that my book is out,
Yeah.
I'm really wanting to shine a light on my podcast as I'm
Hmm.
going on other people's. So it's another place to
Hmm.
hear what I have to say, learn, listen. It's free,
Yeah.
it's valuable. So
And
many
it's
different
not just for
ways.
people with addictions, it's for people and families who have somebody with addiction in the family. Instead of condemning them or overloving them, or, I've had a woman on, which I'm sure you would love to have, which her daughter was addicted. She got shot. And she was in hospital, and she said, I'm not going back to that life, Mom. But they gave her opioids.
Ugh.
And then she became addicted to that, went back into the street, and it didn't matter what her mother did. She could not save her, and she ended up being shot to death. And so, there's also the other side of it, of the people like yourself. You couldn't save your sister, and there are family members trying to save their children, trying to save their loved ones, and they can't, and they don't know what to do, and they feel helpless and hopeless. And we need to support them too, and
Yes,
give
we
them
do.
skills and tools of what they can do. So it's very important. There is no shame, there is no blame, there is no taboo. Everybody has some form of addiction in some way. We need
Yep.
to address it. We need to own it. We need to find out where it comes from. and we need to do something about it, and we need to support the people that have loved ones that are going through it, because they're going through the pain as well of not being able to help the people they love.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
all there.
Absolutely.
So
It's
yes.
all there.
So thank you for the work that you're doing. I know it was a rough journey getting there, but you're still a youngster, right? You've still got many moons to go and a lot of work ahead of you, that really is not going to normalize addiction in the right that it's okay, but normalize that we need to address the programming so that addiction doesn't become the norm, or it doesn't become the escape. Because
Yep.
what is addiction? It's trying to escape something,
Exactly.
right? So if we understand the program and we take ownership of ourselves, then that addiction doesn't even have a chance to get in there. We've got to stop running from ourselves, but first we've got to find out what it is we're trying to run from.
Amen.
Thank you so much, love. And of course, you are all on the, as you said, the podcast, The Truth About Addiction, and Instagram, your name. I've got Greenleaf Book Group. Is that something different?
That's my publishing company.
Okay. And so it's all here, but please get the book. You know, this is again something I say to people, please have a book club. Excellent. Everybody read and talk about it. But I say have a podcast club. Everybody listen to the podcast, take notes, and then
Yes.
openly, winningly talk about it. Right? There's something you learned you didn't know. Somebody's willing to impart something. Instead of just one side from your side, now you've got more rounded conversation there. Make it normal for us to talk about it, demystify it, de-shame it, and then we will start being able to treat it in the right way. Let's be
Yep.
supportive. Let's stop being condemning.
I love that. And I did that over the pandemic with a group of women.
Mm,
It was
excellent.
really, really incredible. I also want to say one more thing for your listeners, which is that I am going to send you a link for them,
Mhm.
and it is a book giveaway. So for
Mm.
the first 10 people who fill out the form, it takes less than 30 seconds. I will send you guys a signed copy of my book.
And
So if we
what I
could,
don't I normally to do on this is because I don't want people just coming to your show page and clicking on the link. I'm actually going to they have to listen to the show to get the link.
oh, I love that.
And so this is right at the very end. So we know that you've actually listened to it. And so the first
Perfect.
10 people will get it, and they can either contact you or contact me. Probably best you contact me, selfdiscoverywisdom@gmail.com. And for those first 10 people, I'll forward on to you. But this isn't just a giveaway just because you looked at the page. This is a giveaway for the people that listened. All right. So gotta earn it, guys.
Woo!
So thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and keep on doing it. I know you're going to be out there making a huge difference. But I'm also glad that you accepted the journey, the calling, but also the discovery of what was needed to
Mm,
change. Because yes, very often there's some good things there that have worked in the past don't work anymore because the dialogue isn't speaking to everyone, or they're not addressing the times. And by you rewording it in a way that speaks to everybody and de-shames and
mm,
mystifies it, it just opens up to people to say, you know what, I didn't realize that that habit was addiction. And it's time I paid attention to it. Catch
mm.
them when they're small, folks. Okay. So, folks, until next time, thank you so much, Samantha. Remember, we are our own healers when we're aware of what the problem is, but there's always somebody there to help you along the way. So, until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Just go to the podcast tag at the top there and you will see all the many genres and all 3,000 shows ready for your listening. We are here to serve you, to help you on your journey of life, and we know that through inspiration it begets invitation. We are supported by you, the listeners, and those that we interview. Anything that you can spare us in donation would be greatly accepted, and we do hope that you enjoy the next show.